I'm here to talk about A Deadly Wandering. By way of introduction, I just want to tell you a quick story about my first book, which came out in 2006. It was called Hooked, and a friend of mine went to Barnes & Noble, and he saw it on the front counter, there, and it was sandwiched between a Superman anthology and a book by Martha Stewart. So my friend's kind of fired up because there's my book, and he takes out his camera phone to take a picture of it, and from behind the desk at Barnes & Noble, the clerk comes over. He's just curious. He says to my friend, "What are you doing?" And my friend says, "Oh, I'm taking a picture of my friend's book." And the clerk from Barnes & Noble says, "You have got to be kidding me. You're friends with Martha Stewart?" So, Martha Stewart I ain't, and nevertheless, you've had me here. I want to say thank you. It is, I've had an opportunity to speak in a lot of places, and once I got to speak after Bill Clinton, extremely humbling because almost everybody left the room when he was done. But in spite of all those experiences, and I say this very sincerely, this is probably the most important journalistic audience I've had the opportunity to speak before. And the reason is that the people you represent are leaders of the future, they're decision makers, they're at a pivotal point in their lives, and so I just want to thank you very much for having me, and also say that the butt-kissing portion of the speech is now over. Okay, A Deadly Wandering. Look, we all know that texting and driving is dangerous. We also know that many of us are still doing it. It is, maybe without being hyperbolic, the biggest disconnect we have in society today, the gap between what we say we should do while we're driving and what we actually do. And it's a disconnect that carries over in lots of parts of our lives. The gap between what we say we should do with our devices, how much we should attend to them, and how much we actually attend to them, how much we steal time from our homework, our friends, our spouses, our workmates. How did we get here? How did we get to the point where there is such a gap between our professed behaviors and our attitudes, our professed attitudes and our behaviors? And how do we get out of this place into a healthier relationship? The answer, remarkably, goes through an incredible story, one I would not have believed had I not sat front row for it, that winds through a small town in northern Utah. It is a story of a mysterious deadly car crash, a gumshoe investigation, a first of its kind prosecution, an intense legislative battle, a scientific journey, and ultimately a story of redemption. And all of that pales by comparison by what else this story in a small town of northern Utah is, which is a story of extraordinary characters, dealing with impossible razor's edge moral questions in the digital age. And most of all, it is the story of one young man, and if you'll allow me, I'd like to introduce him to you today. His name is Reggie Shaw, and in 2006, Reggie Shaw was 19 years old, and he was really fairly an all-American kid, a jock in high school, but the nice kind of jock. He played basketball, his teachers liked him, his friends liked him. He dreamed more than anything of going on an LDS mission. And one morning, in September of 2006, the last day of summer, a tragedy took place that Reggie caused that would change him and now is changing the world. Here's what happened. It's 6:30 in the morning. It's dark. Reggie is driving through what would be a Verdant Valley in the northernmost county of Utah, but it's dark, it's freezing rain, he's going 55 miles an hour. Behind him is a farrier, a certified horseshoe maker carrying 2 tons of horseshoes and horseshoe making equipment. This is a missile at highway speeds, and the farrier notices that occasionally Reggie is crossing the yellow divider. And the farrier, John Kaiserman, says to himself, "This guy's going to cause us all some trouble." Coming the other direction that morning in a Saturn are Jim Fafaro and Keith Odell. These are family men, and they are genuine rocket scientists. They are building the booster for the next space shuttle. One of them so pronounced in his abilities that his nickname is the Genius, and he has won NASA's highest award for safety. And the next time Reggie crosses the yellow divider, he clips the Saturn carrying Jim and Keith. They have no time to react. They spin across the road where they are struck broadside by the Farrier, a collision so violent that Jim and Keith are dead on impact. And 100 yards down the road, Reggie stops. He is unhurt. His Chevy SUV is unscathed. Virtually, he says he doesn't know what happened. Maybe he hydroplaned. This is how a deadly wandering begins, with one small exception. I will tell you that up comes a tenacious state trooper 1 week back from Iraq, where he has helped detect roadside bombs. He is a stubborn man, and for the good in this case. Reggie says he hydroplaned. The trooper's not buying it. Something doesn't add up. He drives Reggie to the hospital for his mandatory drug test, and on the way, he sees Reggie reach into his pocket and pull out his phone, evidently responding to a silent buzzing. And the trooper notices that Reggie texts with one hand, and he says, "That's when I realized Reggie is a one-hander." This ends the first chapter of A Deadly Wandering. What ensues, and I'll be very brief with this because I want to tell you something much more significant than this in the grand scheme. What ensues is a gumshoe investigation. Reggie gets a lawyer. He doesn't want to disappoint his community. A great human drama. His family backs him up. There's no legal precedent. The trooper discovers that, in fact, through phone records, Reggie has texted 11 times in the minutes and seconds around the crash, maybe exactly at the crash. This book, despite what I've just told you, is not alone about texting and driving, and maybe not even predominantly so. It's about what was happening inside Reggie's brain, and our brain as we use our devices, not just behind the wheel, but all the time. And so let me transition to tell you what was going on inside Reggie's brain. I'd ask you all to get an image for me. Picture a cave person tending to a fire. And the cave person gets a tap on the shoulder from behind. I will ask you the obvious rhetorical question: can the cave person avoid responding to the tap on the shoulder? The answer is, of course not. Thank you for this searing insight, New York Times. The reason that the person can't avoid turning around is because you don't know if it's opportunity or threat. Is it a potential mate? Is it someone with food? Is it someone with a spear? Now move to the car. You're driving. Just like the cave person tending to the fire, the phone rings, it buzzes. It is a proverbial tap on the shoulder from anyone, anywhere in the world. What chance do you have? Now let me go back and tell you what's happening inside your brain just at that moment. When the cave person is tending to the fire, it takes this part of the brain. It's called the prefrontal cortex. It is the most evolved part of the human brain, arguably the most evolved part of the human being. It dictates our control, what we focus on, our attention, responsible for art, architecture, civilization, books. But when you get a tap on the shoulder from behind, when a lion roars, the cave person gets a signal from here, the reptilian parts of the brain. Primitive survival mechanisms. It could be a lion. It is a lion. Run. It hijacks this part of the brain, and for good reason. You could die if you don't respond. In the car, same thing. Same neuroscience at work, a veritable hijacking of the brain. So, now I check my notes. I'm not responding to a text. You may take this moment to do so. This is an incredibly delicate balance between these two parts of the brain, and what scientists will tell you today is that it is potentially getting out of whack in the digital age. The ubiquity of our phones and the nature of the information, which is social, is so powerful that it can hijack this. Let me read you a quote from that appears in the book. When the phone rings, it triggers a whole social reward network, and it triggers an orienting response that has been wired into us since hunter-gatherer times. You had to pay attention for survival. If you didn't attend, you got eaten by lions. It's in our DNA. This is particularly true for young people. Why? This part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, is still developing. That much harder to resist this ping. One more thing. This relationship with our devices is not merely about the information, it is about the mechanics of our relationship with the device. The mere interaction with your device, and I bet you can attest to this if you think about how you deal with your device, gives you a little adrenaline burst, what they call a dopamine squirt. You do it more and more, you get a little buzz. In its absence, you feel bored. And so you seek it out more. This is habituating. It has addictive properties. I will stop shy of calling it addictive because that is a particularly clinical word. At this point, I fear that you will think this is a screed against technology. It is not at all that. Here's what I hope. I hope that through an engaging, can't take your eyes off it narrative, what will happen is that readers will get engaged with the mechanics of the science. This story interweaves the drama as it unfolds with the drama of neuroscience going back to 1850 to show our relationship with our device. My hope is through that becoming informed, through seeing how we relate to our devices, it may actually allow us to make more informed, more thoughtful, more decisive, more intentional choices. Whether we're behind the wheel, in the classroom, with our homework, with our partners, with our spouses. I will end with two things. One is two quick reviews, one that just appeared on Amazon. This is not from my wife. I did not pay this person. This person wrote, I heard, it's called Airline Pilot M. Jacobson. I've heard it said this book should be required reading for students. I doubt we can force it on them. I don't think we'll need to. Just open it to the first page and they won't be able to stop reading. I know I couldn't, and the New York Times wrote in its review, and I know I worked there, this was also not paid for nor written by my wife. It says, as instructive social parable, this should be required reading in schools next to Fast Food Nation and To Kill a Mockingbird. Last thing, the subtitle of this book is Tragedy and Redemption in the Age of Attention. This is ultimately not just a story of a tragedy. It is a story of redemption. Reggie comes clean. He admits what he's done. He goes on to change the Utah State Legislature to speak more than any other person in this country. I have never seen anyone so redemptive as he gets down on his knees, sobbing, and begs people, please don't become me. He is our proxy. He shows us what it's like to be in a dangerous relationship with our device and how to come out of the woods. He teaches us how to redeem ourselves and how we might make better choices. My last story about what we can learn from young people. My son was 2 at the time this story happened. He's walking along the floor in his grandparents' house. His foot hits a little Mattel portable phone. It rings. He's 2. I don't even know that he knows the words he's about to say, let alone in this order. He picks up the phone, and Milo, my son, says, puts it to his ear, he goes, I'll call you from a landline. Clearly, he knows something we don't or should. Thank you for your time. A Deadly Wandering.